a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So let's get started on this Masking 101 for Beginners webinar. So it is a beginners webinar, and we're going to talk a lot about masking. Before we begin here, real quick, a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. So if you do need to leave for any reason, or if you miss out on something, we're going to have it posted to our blog and YouTube and basically all of our social media later today, so you can catch up on whatever you miss. Also, there is a Q&A section throughout the webinar that you can answer or post questions into. Feel free to hit that up with any questions you see fit. You know, if I'm going through something and it's a little bit difficult or I didn't explain it well enough, you know, definitely get up into that Q&A module and ask as many questions as you like. If you're watching it live on YouTube, same thing. You can answer or ask questions inside of the comment section, and we'll try to get to as many of those throughout the webinar as we can. So a little bit about the webinar today. We're going to talk a lot about the basics of masking. So it is a masking 101, so it is going to be geared more towards the beginner side of masking and photo editing in general. We're going to talk a lot about the basics of masking, sort of what masking is, how masking works, where you can find masks and how to apply them inside Photo RAW, some of the different tools that you can use to modify masks and also to create them. And then we'll talk about some different keyboard shortcuts that you can use to access those tools. All right, so let's get started and just talk about the basics of masking and what masking is. So masking is just a non-destructive editing technique that allows us to modify certain areas on our photo, whether it be applying different filters or local adjustments. It allows us to target certain areas and apply filters and adjustments to them. Also, masking allows us to replace skies and backgrounds. And, you know, a lot of people talk about masking out skies and replacing areas on your photo. Well, that all has to do with masking. The biggest thing to take away from masking is probably that it's a non-destructive technique. So it's not actually modifying or altering your original file. You're simply just using it as a non-destructive tool to apply different settings to different areas on your shot. So now that we kind of understand somewhat the basics of what masking is, let's apply a couple masks and it'll probably give you a better idea of what masking is. So we have these two people here at Cannon Beach, and let's say we have this area over here that we want to add some detail to, or we want to just bring out some more detail in our photo. Well, we can go in to our effects tab here, and I'm just going to add a filter, and I'm just going to add dynamic contrast. And just for the purpose of this webinar, I'm going to use Surreal. This is just so that you guys can see on your guys' screen the amount of detail and things that I'm applying to the photo. So, all right, so if I turn this off and on here, this dynamic contrast filter, if I turn this off and on, you'll see it's providing a lot of detail over here that's really nice, and I like how that's working on the wood and stuff, but it's crunching up that area in my rock quite a bit. And let's say we don't want that applied to the rock, and we only want it applied to this area over here. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to think about masking, because we don't want our filter applied to our entire photo. We only want it applied to a portion of the shot. This is where masking comes in. So to access your masks or to view your masking options, they're always going to be in this little area right here with the little rectangle and the circle in the middle. Those are always going to be your masking options. If you hover over it, it'll tell you show hide masking options. Once you click on it, now you have all of the different masking options for that filter. Now you'll notice also that this little rectangle here is completely white. Well, if I view my mask, if I click this view button here, this is my mask view mode. So it's going to be showing me my mask. It's not showing me my photo. It's just showing me the view of what my mask is on my photo. So let's click view here. And you'll see that it's entirely white. And a great rule of thumb with masking is that white reveals and black conceals. So with that, this entire white area right here is telling me that it is revealing this entire dynamic contrast filter onto my photo. Now, if I go out of mask view mode, and I turn this off and on, it's applied to the entire shot. Now let's go back into mask view mode here. And there's actually two ways you can access mask view mode, just before I get ahead of myself here. And it's this mask view button right here inside your filter, or you can go down to the bottom area right here, and it's just this button here. And that will show you your mask view mode. Okay, so now let's say we want to turn that mask off, but we don't want to essentially turn the mask off. Let's say we want to make it so that the filter isn't being applied anywhere on our photo. All we have to do is head down to this little button here called invert. So now if I invert the mask, now it's entirely black. That means that there's no filter being applied to my photo because black conceals, white reveals. So this filter is being concealed from my shot. So if I view this and turn this off and on, nothing's happening to my photo because there's no filter being applied. If you see black in this rectangle right here in your mask view, that means nothing is happening to your shot. So now let's say we want to, again, just apply that filter to this area on our photo, but we don't want it applied to anywhere else on the shot. So there's a few ways we can do that. Let's talk about the most basic way that you can apply that filter. You're going to want to grab your masking brush, and whenever you add a filter, it's going to grab your masking brush automatically for you. But let's say you zoom in or something and you don't have the masking brush selected. Well, you can grab the masking brush by heading over to your left toolbar here and clicking on the masking brush icon there, or you can hit B on your keyboard. So B for brush, it's really easy. If you want to grab your masking brush, just hit B on your keyboard. I'll just make this full screen for you guys. It might be easier to see. Okay, so now that I've grabbed my masking brush by hitting B on my keyboard, now I have these options up here on this top bar that are going to allow me to modify the brush that I'm using to apply this mask. So we have our mode here, which this is just telling Photo RAW whether we want to paint in the filter or local adjustment or whatever it may be, or if we want to paint it out. Keep in mind that if this is black and it's concealing the entire filter, you're not going to be able to paint out anything. So you just have to have something there to paint out or something not there to paint in. So that's what you can use to paint in or paint out. And if you want to switch those modes, if you look at the circle on my screen in the middle of the brush, if I hold down Shift and X, you notice how it went to a plus sign from a minus? That's just allowing me to change the paint in, paint out modes. So it's just Shift and X, and you can change your modes. We also have size here. This is just dealing with the brush size that you want to apply. You can just toggle it with this to make it bigger or larger or smaller, or you can just use the bracket keys on your keyboard. Next, we have feathering, which is just dealing with the hardness or softness of your brush's edge. And then we have opacity. And we're going to talk about in a sec, we're going to show the different opacities for brushing in a mask, but let's just stay at 100 for now. Okay, so now let's zoom out here. And I'll grab my masking brush by hitting B on my keyboard. I'm set to paint in. And now let's say I just want to paint this onto this area and see the detail. I can just simply paint that on, make this a little bigger here. Just like that. And now it's only being applied to this area over here. And you'll notice in our filter options that we've actually added some white into that mask view. So now let's view our mask here. So you'll see over here where we painted in on that side of that building, that it's showing that it's all white. That means that filter, this area, that white area is revealing that filter onto our shot. So if I turn this off and on, it's only applied that filter to this area because we've masked it onto that area only. Now let's say we want to apply this filter to this bottom area over here and these people, but if we paint this on like this, it's quite strong and it's a little too intense for me. So let's redo that. And now this is where your opacity comes into play. So if I turn down my opacity We'll turn it down to about, I don't know, 40 or something. And now let's paint this on in this area down here. It's not as strong. It's a little more subtle, and I like how that's working on pulling out that detail and some of the shadows. But you'll notice if I go to my mask view here, that it's not entirely white. It's a little bit gray. Well, that's because I was using a lower opacity. When you're using a lower opacity, it's going to mix between white and black so that it corrects for that opacity that you're using, so it doesn't reveal the entire filter. It only reveals a portion of that filter onto your mask. So now let's say I paint over that again. It's going to bring in more white because it's applying more of that 43% opacity onto this mask. But if I painted it over here, it'd be that same gray color. So that's a quick way that you can paint on a little bit less of a mask onto your photo because you're just lowering the opacity. Are there, oh, sorry. So you 1 second here. Let me just flip this page. Okay, so those are some of the basics of just using your masking brush just to paint on a little bit of a mask or a filter onto your photo. There's a few different ways that you can actually apply masks onto your shot. Let's go in here and let's change our photo real quick. And also, just a reminder, before I start editing this photo, there is a Q&A module inside your webinar. So if you do have any questions, feel free to hit that up and I can answer them throughout this webinar. Okay, so now we have this photo here and sort of the same thing. We only want to deal with, a portion of this shot. We don't want to modify an entire photo. We just want to modify, specific areas that, let's say we want to add some light or some detail into. So we're going to use masking. And for this particular photo, I figured this would be a good photo to show you guys the perfect brush, because the perfect brush sounds like an advanced tool, but it's actually a pretty basic tool and it's really simple to use. So this time for this photo, we're going to be dealing with local adjustments. That last photo, we dealt a lot with filters. So this one's going to deal with local adjustments a bit more. And then after this photo, we'll get into a shot where we're actually going to use local adjustments, filters, and use different masking brush and gradients to actually modify that entire photo. So let's add a local adjustment onto our shot. We'll head into the local adjustments tab. And let's say I only want to reveal some shadows from this guy. I only want to pull out some shadows from him, but I don't want to modify anywhere else on the photo. I'm going to go into my preset options here in this adjustment, and I'm just going to click Reveal Shadows. Just like that. And we could brush this on just by using the brush and try to fit in the lines as we could, or we could use our perfect brush up here to actually paint this in without modifying anywhere else around our photo. So you'll notice that once I added that local adjustment, it grabbed my local adjustment brush here. And the local adjustment brush is the exact same thing as your masking brush, but it's only used for local adjustments. So if I hit this masking brush here, this is going to be painting out any filters. And if I grab this local adjustment brush, it's only going to be painting in or out local adjustments. So you can grab your masking brush by hitting K on your keyboard. And if you want to grab your local adjustment brush, or sorry, I'm getting this confused. If you want to grab your masking brush, it's B on your keyboard. And if you want to grab your local adjustment brush, just hit K. And you can hover over at that icon and it will tell you what you can use to grab the brush. Okay, so now we want to paint in the Reveal Shadows adjustment, but we only want it to be painted in on this guy here. So we're going to grab our perfect brush. And the perfect brush is a great way to separate tonal and color ranges in your subject and background so that you don't modify your foreground or background with whatever you're dealing with. So It's basically going to detect different tonal and color ranges so that you don't modify anything else but your subject that you're painting in. So we'll zoom in here real quick. Oops. Oh, maybe it's fit all the way. Okay, so we'll just hit K on our keyboard and let's just brush this on real quick. And you'll notice that it's only brushing it on the person and it's not modifying anywhere around him. Okay, so now if we go over and we view this mask, you'll see that it only painted onto the person right here, but it didn't actually modify anywhere around him at all. So this is a great way, especially in instances like this, if you have a subject with a large tonal background or something that you don't want to modify, the perfect brush is going to be your best friend whenever you're wanting to lighten up those areas on your subject. So there's a couple different ways that you can actually see your mask, and the perfect brush, I just wanted to talk about the perfect brush a little bit because this is a great way to use the perfect brush and also the other way to view your mask. So there's two ways that you can actually view your mask, and you can view it with this grayscale way where it's either black or white or black and gray or however you have the opacities mixed up with your brushes, or you can view it in red overlay, which is probably the best way to do a perfect brush. So let me show you how to get to that way. We'll view this mask real quick so we can view our photo. And let's just go up to our menu bar here and just click mask. And then just go down to view mode. And then you can just click red overlay. And now if I view this mask, it's showing me that all of this red area isn't where, so basically the entire red area, nothing's being applied to that. But if it's clear and you can't see the red, that's where your filter is being applied to your photo. Filter or local adjustment. So let's actually just reset this mask real quick. And now let's say you want to put this perfect brush to use and you want to apply this to this person. A great way to do that is just by using this red overlay mask. So now if you brush this on, you can really see where that's being applied. And it's a lot easier to brush this perfect brush on to your subject. If I turn this off and on, does a great job of pulling out some of that darker areas around our subject here. Okay, so now we have our subject. Actually, let me a little bit more here. Just gonna pull up the contrast, or pull down the contrast a little bit here. There we go. Okay, so now we've added some light into our subject, but now let's say we want to add some light into this area on our foreground just to bring in some detail and give our photo a little bit more pop. Well, we can do that by adding a new local adjustment layer. We'll do the same thing we did before. We'll reveal shadows. And instead of using our perfect brush and our masking brush, we're simply going to use our adjustment brush, which is the same thing as your masking brush, but just used for local adjustments. Or, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself again. We're going to use the local adjustment gradient, the adjustable gradient. So the adjustable gradient basically is using a gradient to act as your mask. So the adjustable gradient, you can use these different presets in here. You have linear bottom, linear top, and these are great ways that you can apply masks onto foregrounds or backgrounds, especially if you have a horizon line like we do here. These are a great way that you can actually just mask in a large area on your photo with just a gradient. So we have this gradient right here, and I'm just going to drop this down, and I'll flip it around. Oops. And if I pull this down, this is the feathering right here. If I pull the feathering down, just like that, you'll see that this top area doesn't have any of that local adjustment applied to it. It's literally just the bottom area on my photo. So now if I go into my mask view options and I view this mask, and actually I'm going to go up to grayscale. And I view this mask, you'll see that white area is only being applied to the bottom of my photo, and the rest of this top area is black. So that this local adjustment is only being applied to the bottom area of my shot, and this black area is telling me that that local adjustment is being concealed. So really quick way to actually just adjust either the foreground or the background, especially if you're using large tonal areas on your photo. Okay, so I'll view this real quick, and I think we have a question. Let me just look and see. Okay, so Brian Lowe asked, can you show how to remove the mask on the part between his left arm and body so the sky shows through? Yes, so let's go back to this local adjustment mask. So Brian's asking how to remove the mask on the part between his left arm and body so that the sky shows through. I think the best way to modify a mask, let's view this mask again. Oh, it seems like it's showing through, but okay, this is a good way to just show you how to remove areas that you've masked on. So let's say we want to remove some of this brightness from maybe this hand over here, or maybe his legs or something. We can actually just do that by grabbing our local adjustment brush again, and we'll just set it to paint out by hitting Shift and X on our keyboard. And then you can do, basically the same thing you did before, but just removing it, and you can remove, any areas on the photo or in the layer that you want. So let's move on real quick, because that might be a bad example on how to remove masks. But yeah, I'm actually kind of confused, Brian, on where you want it to be removed from. But we'll just move forward, and then we'll try to get to that question later. Do you want to put in just maybe a better explanation of the question you're asking? Because I'm not sure what you're referring to with the sky coming through his arm and body. So let's move on real quick here to a different photo. Once it loads here, we'll get to editing it. Okay, so now we'll go into the edit module. And I basically just added a little bit of style to the shot. Oops. There we go. So now we want to add some different filters and things to our photo. So now we want to add some different filters and local adjustments to our photo, but we only want them applied to different certain areas on our shot. So we're going to use different effects and local adjustments here. So we'll add an effect, and the first effect I want to add is I want to add a glow filter. And I usually like this lighter preset here. Okay, so that looks a little wild on top of our entire shot, but I like how that works on my water here. So we're going to do the same thing that we did before earlier. We're going to go into our masking options, and you'll notice that again, it's entirely white, but we only want it applied to specific areas on our shot. So again, we're going to invert it so that it's entirely black and so that it's concealed from our entire photo. And now we're going to paint this in over our water. And we're actually going to use a little bit less opacity than 100. We're going to use about 75. And we're just going to paint this in just nice and light on our water here. Okay, so now if we turn this filter off and on, you'll see it's only being applied to the water. And now if I view my mask here, I mean, obviously these little scribbles aren't the greatest way to show you a mask, but you know, it kind of just shows you that I just painted on it just kind of lightly and wasn't really going in between the lines or anything, but it still added a nice filtery effect, but it only applied it to the water. So if you are, you know, applying filters and masking them, you don't have to be insanely specific, especially if you're dealing with, you know, large areas like this in your photo where there's a lot of water, because you can also play with the opacity of this filter. You can tone down on the opacity of your brush whenever you're brushing it in. Let's say you wanted less glow. You could reset this mask. Oops. You could pull it down to about 50. And then you could even paint it on a little less. So it's, I'll just reset it. Go back to that. But just kind of giving you an example of, you know, it's an easy way to just mask on specific filters into specific areas. And don't forget that you can always come over here and play with the filter itself. You can modify the amount, you can modify the opacity. There's a bunch of different ways that you can actually modify the filter to where you're not stuck with that one look. So, okay, so now let's say we want to apply some dynamic contrast and we want to bring in some detail, but we don't want it applied to the water. Well, a quick way to do that, since we just painted on that glow filter to the water, would be simply to copy and paste that mask. So let's just copy this glow mask here. If I click copy, that's going to copy my entire glow mask here. It's going to copy this mask right here. And now let's add a filter. We'll add dynamic contrast. And we'll make it surreal again, just so I can show you guys, but we'll turn it down quite a bit. Maybe about right there. And now let's go into our masking options for dynamic contrast. And let's paste this mask. And now if I view it, it's the same mask as we had earlier on our glow filter. But now if we invert it, it's the exact opposite. And now if we view it, you'll see that it's only being applied to the rocks area and these rocks area in between, and it's actually not being applied to the water. So that's a great way that you can actually just take a mask that you made before. Maybe you spent some nice time painting in a mask, and you can just easily copy it and then just paste it onto your photo. And it'll save you a lot of time, especially if you have large areas that you need to brush in or brush out. Okay, so let's pull down on that a little bit more here. Okay, so now we've added some glow and we've added some nice detail to our shot. Now let's go in and add some light and some dark by just using local adjustments. So I'm just going to head into my local adjustments tab here. And I'm actually going to use a recover. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I didn't save my preset into this local adjustment. So we're just going to use darken. We'll just use darken, and we'll actually cool off the temperature just a tad. Okay, so now let's say we want to add sort of a vignette style, but we don't want to add a vignette. We want to just kind of paint in the dark where we want it to be painted in. We just use a local adjustment layer, and I'm going to make sure that my opacity on my adjustment brush is set to 100. And now I can just simply use my bracket keys on my keyboard. I'm going to make my brush size bigger. And then I can just brush this dark area kind of on my photo to use it as a vignette. And I'm basically just doing this so I can remove some of this foliage as like a distraction, because it seems a little bit overbearing, especially the bright green around my shot. And now we can just go into our local adjustment layer and we'll turn down the opacity. Have it right there. Now if we turn this off and on, it really helps to kind of focus our eyes on this area in here. Maybe we can turn that down even a little bit more. There we go. And now let's say we want to remove some of this area from this log because I kind of overpainted. So I'll just hit Shift X on my keyboard. And then I can just brush that off of my log. So now if we go into our masking options here and we view this, you'll see it's only around this area over here that we painted it in, and it's not actually being applied to this area in the middle. And that's just because we were using our adjustment brush and we just brushed around this area right here and we didn't brush anywhere in the inside. So masking, if you think about it like just in terms of black conceals and white reveals, it makes it a lot simpler whenever you're trying to mask in things. So now let's say we want to add in some detail and maybe a little bit more light into our log right here. We'll add a new local adjustment layer. We'll click Lighten. I'll add some blacks. I'll add some structure. And I'll probably add a little bit of warmth. Now I'll just hold down Shift and hit X. And I'll just brush this on my log right here. There we go. So now if I view this mask, see it just kind of roughly painted on that log right there. Oops. And now let's go in and we'll just modify the opacity just a tad bit. There we go. There we go. So in just a quick amount of time, we've added in some different masks to our photo just by using local adjustment layers. So those are just some simple ways that you can apply masks and just a few ways that you can think about how masking works and how to apply it to your shot. Okay, so Brian did come back. So the space between the person's left arm and body, so my right view. Sorry, Brian. So we'll go back to that photo that I had up earlier. And I'm not sure that that is the sky on his left arm. Yeah, I don't think there is any space between his left arm and his body for the sky to show through. But like I was showing you earlier, that's an easy way to do it was just to Shift and X, and then you could paint it out from that specific layer in general. So, okay, let's do just one more quick masking technique here, or just show you guys one more quick way to mask. Just gonna go in and grab a photo here. Okay, so I have this photo, and let's say we just want to bring out some of the detail and the light in this tree right here because it's basically the only one that has light on it. Well, a quick way to do that would be just to bring in an effect, or a filter rather, add a dynamic contrast filter. We'll hit surreal again, and we'll go up to, oh wait, we don't want surreal. We'll just do natural. We'll go up to our masking options. And again, you'll see that it's all white because it's revealing the entire filter onto the photo. So we'll invert that so it's completely off of it. And then we're going to use our masking brush because it's already selected for us because we've added a filter. We're going to hold down Shift and hit X so that we have it to paint in. And now I'm going to grab my perfect brush again so that I can paint it in on this tree area right here. Because the tree area is separate from the background. The background has this nice blue color into it, and this tree is white and black. So it should be a pretty good one to use on the perfect brush. And I'm actually going to go up to my masking options in the top bar, and I'm going to change my view mode to red overlay, which I usually like to do if I'm painting on with perfect brush. And then I'll just use the perfect brush to paint this on to the tree here. Oops. Okay, so I'll view this again, and we'll just pull up on the shadows. Add some blacks. We'll actually add a little bit more small contrast into the shot. Okay, so now we've actually just quickly added in a little bit of dynamic contrast into the photo, and we've applied it pretty quickly just by using a perfect brush and our masking brush. So if you're looking to apply masks to your photo, the best way to think about it is, where are you trying to mask in? What are you trying to mask out? And how can you achieve that? And since this is a basic masking webinar, I would say the best way to develop an understanding of masking is just to simply play with them and play with your masking brush and the different opacities, just to figure out how you like it to be applied to your photo. So for example, like with the first image, we'll go back to the first image real quick. Why are these all mixed up? So we'll grab this photo again. And so at the beginning of this webinar, we were talking about how it's being applied to specific areas on your photo. And masking is kind of inherently the best way to do that because you're non-destructively editing your photo. So there's nothing being applied to the original shot. And it allows you to just target specific areas. So when I was showing you earlier with the dynamic contrast and how we only had it applied over here, there's a few different ways that you can actually do this without actually using the perfect brush. So if you wanted to use your masking bug, for example, you could reset this mask, invert it, and you could actually grab your masking bug, which is the same thing as your adjustable gradient. You could drop it down. Oops. Why is that not being? Oh, there's no preset. Sorry, guys. I don't know why this is not. There we go. Oops. So just like that. And now if I view this mask, you'll see it's only being revealed to this area over here. But that doesn't mean you can't go in and you can modify it even further. So you have this gradient right here, and you can actually grab your masking brush and you can set it to paint in. And you could literally just paint in this entire area and just kind of use that adjustable gradient as your guide so you don't miss any of the, or you actually miss all these areas that you're not trying to crunch up. So just because you get yourself into a masking situation, and let's say you drop that adjustable gradient down and you don't know if that you can go in and modify it even further, you can always go in and modify that mask even further, even by using your gradient or your adjustable gradient and any of the presets that come with it. So in your mask view mode, oops, we'll go to grayscale. In your mask view mode in grayscale, you can actually remove areas on here as well. So you can paint out areas in your mask view mode, and you can also paint out areas whenever you add in a masking tool such as an adjustable gradient or anything like that. All right, so that might be, but before we wrap it up, I'm gonna see if there's any more questions. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to hit up that Q&A. I'll give it about a couple more minutes and then we'll just probably end the webinar from here. But if there are any questions, please feel free to hit up the Q&A module and we'll try to get to some of those. All right, guys. So it doesn't seem like there's any more questions coming in. So let's just end it at that. And just a heads up, guys, we have an advanced technique masking webinar on Thursday. So if you do plan on learning some more techniques through masking, feel free to hit up that webinar. I'm going to actually include the link to that, the registration link inside the YouTube description and then on our blog. So yeah, I'll see you guys for the advanced webinar. And thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Dylan with ON1. I hope you guys learned a little bit about masking and how to use it. Stay tuned for more webinars and more videos. And thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.